out in several of the previous presentations.
Well, thank you for staying here for the last possible session. As the last 2 days have gone through, I have become increasingly worried that someone would cover what I would be talking about today. On the first one, we had Philippa talking about the Piercebridge River Assemblage, which is in our collection. We've then had Gary Bankhead talking about obviously the River Wear Assemblage, and then we had the emergency Ben Roberts, who I was very worried was going to talk about all the Bronze Age material I was going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about in this is something quite different. We're not divers, we're not academics, we're museum professionals. And it's often ourselves that are taking all the wonderful work people are doing around us, using an intersection of sort of interpretation, science and community work, and presenting the work to the public. You write 20,000 words, we turn it into 300 words. You find 30,000 objects, we put 100 on display. And it's us that are navigating and interpreting the key information to the public. So what I want to just explore is some of the value today of collaboration and co-curation wherever possible, particularly in development of projects and research activities that draw on collections and archives generated through archaeological work in association museums. I'm afraid I do teach this stuff on interpretation here at the university. You're going to get a crash course on interpretation theory. Those who are my students will know this, and when they do an exhibition, they literally can recite it at me. We just want to demonstrate that when you collaborate museums, which isn't always possible from the beginning, like we have with Gary and we have with Reading, with Philippa and Hella, and how we have with Ben, what you get can be quite special. And actually, for the Museum of Archaeology, our identity is now becoming associated with river archaeology. And I just want to explore how that's happened in the last 10 years. So museums play an essential role in bringing archaeology to the public by making artifacts and findings from rivers accessible, tangible, and understandable. Through curated exhibitions, storytelling, and interactive programs, including schools, museums can bring to life the socio-industrial and ecological dynamics that have shaped the landscape. If you look at this lovely 17th century map of County Durham, can't quite see it, but the county is actually divided into three by the rivers. And rivers play a major part in County Durham, whether it is the Tees, the Wear, the Derwent, or all the minor rivers, such as the Greta, that make up the county. And it's often overlooked in our history in favour of the coal works and the coast. The rivers in the county represent more of a sort of cross-period activities. Now, the history of the Museum of Archaeology is completely tied to rivers in a way that until I started writing this session, I didn't realise. In 1833, Durham University was established. In 1832, Durham University was established, and in 1833, a museum was established, making it the second oldest university in England that no one has ever heard of. And we really are linked to rivers. If you can imagine the iconic river picture of Durham Cathedral, in front of it, you will see a very small building. This building is known as the Old Fulling Mill. And it's in this building that they established the first museum. They established a museum designed to actually flood. Now, it was a typical cabinet of curiosities, complete with a polar bear's foot, a postcard of Nelson's funeral, and eventually in 1880s, we also get the beginning of archaeology. Up until that point, it also had elements such as St. Cuthbert's coffin, as well as natural history specimens. But even in the Victorian period, they realised that rivers and museums don't mix. And so they moved the museum up to Palace Green, which is that area around the castle and the cathedral. But history likes to repeat itself. In 1930, Eric Burley was appointed as the first lecturer of Roman archaeology within the North, and he basically went and dug up anything he could find. Guess where they set up the new Department of Archaeology? In the Fulling Mill. As the fulling mill grew and grew substantially, it was decided you could no longer keep postgraduate students in an attic. Put this into context, when I was working in the attic, anyone more than a centimetre taller than me would hit their head. If I wore the wrong trainers, I would hit my head. I actually used to have to think about my shoe very carefully. In 1975, they set up a museum, which is fully furbished in 1986. So basically, we have yet again a museum by the river that regularly floods. There's a hole for water to go in and a hole for the water to go out. In 2013, the displays moved to Palace Green, and in 2021, we actually moved the collections out of the fulling mill. I have to say, our stones were in the basement, and if they needed a good clean, well, they would get it once a decade, basically, when the water came through. But the actual physical connection began before I even started. Pretty much as soon as Gary started diving from 2008, there was already an element of community. And in 2014, when I joined, 1 day a week, I should add, 1 day a week as the first paid curator of archaeology, there was already our first student exhibition, the Diving into Durham exhibition, that was done by a master's student in collaboration with Gary. I thought I was going to get out of it, but no, I was asked to design a study day as part of Universities Week, which saw not only students, but small finds specialists and academics come together for a day studying small finds. Little did I know this would be the start of something. This is where I'm going to just build a tiny bit on interpretation. And this is very much the information that's really key for me. Information is not interpretation. Phil Tildeman is the father of interpretation, particularly for museums. He's based on environmental, particularly on the national parks in the United States of America, where they're doing a lot of work in interpretation. And this for me is really important of why this was where our story gets interesting. Interpretation is revelation based upon information. It's not about information. You can present as much information as you like, and people don't really pay any attention. Move.
Didn't agree with you.
No, it didn't. There we are. This is built on by this lovely thing, which I'm only going to this is the only little bit I'm going to say. Sam H. Ham, who again is a major player in interpretation, he basically has 4 principles of interpretation. And this is what I really want to say. When you can make interpretation thematic, organized, relevant in a meaningful way, it becomes enjoyable. Put those 4 things in place and people will pay attention. What we have found for the Museum of Archaeology is our fate is now tied to rivers. Before, we were a museum that was in danger of closing on several occasions. It was run by the Department of Archaeology, with honorary curators, on volunteers, on students. No one really knew what was in the collections. And in the last 10 years, what we've been able to do is around river archaeology, and particularly what people have thrown into rivers, is we now have a theme. We are organised-ish. I mean, when Gary donated his objects, we had 13,500. We counted another extra, so we had 14,500. So I feel we are a little bit organised. It's relevant. It connects with the people of Durham. And then it becomes enjoyable. And this is really important for me. And what Anna's going to talk about is how, as part of her internship, she was given the task of trying to reinterpret some of the Piercebridge material in line with these principles, because we felt it wasn't organised enough. In 2016, I got the sort of phone call you get once in a lifetime when someone said, we found something. What was found was by a metal detectorist, Whitney Houston, also known as Mark. And it was the Lanchester diploma. The Lanchester diploma is the first complete diploma to be discovered in the UK. And this is where I'm going to tie it into rivers. It's made of copper alloy, 4 fragments, and belongs to a gentleman called Vavo Paternus, who basically seems to have spent 26 years messing around the rivers in Cologne. His name is really interesting. The Tagurnus is a high status individual. His father is Magno Tagurnus, again, great lord and master. We appear to have a local high-status individual from the local area, most likely Lanchester, going and spending 26 years playing in the rivers in the Classis Germanica. This change for the museum, the historical side is really important, and I cannot thank enough people like Roger and Tomlin for their help, for their support, people like Dr. David Mason David Mason used to be my line manager. Obviously, he is the expert on the Roman Navy, and I never paid any attention until this turned up. And there was a line when he went, "I bet you wish you'd paid more attention to what I did." And I was like, "Yes, can you help me?" And he did. And this is what happened. We had a full study day. We had an exhibition. I had to put so many business cases in to justify the purchase of this. And I know Sheila's in the audience here, and she'll remember the chaos this caused. We were on the radio, the national telly. We were able to get graphics done. The graphics were done by a graphic novelist. The day we actually installed the Lanchester diploma, we had dozens of people waiting for the doors to open. We had people, and if you talk to anyone, what's really interesting is there's a pride in this object now. There's a pride for something archaeologically based. In a county that has no civic museum, no county museum, this is really important. If you read some of the textbooks, the archaeology of County Durham is overlooked. For ages, it really irritated me that some of the old Shire books said we had no ridge and furrow. When you go through the train on your way back, just look at the quantity of ridge and furrow. The archaeological heritage of County Durham is overlooked. We've got York to the south of us and Newcastle to the top. We don't have a county museum. The Museum of Archaeology is the only museum which is even attempting to do something. Interpretation-wise, don't get me on to colour theory. It's something I lecture on and teach and am interested in. But what we're trying to do with our interpretation is basically say the Romans aren't like what you think. They're not this well-oiled machine. They're not perfect. What they are is people. And the Piercebridge is about people, and the Lanchester diploma is about people as well. The Lanchester diploma gives a named individual, really annoying. He's the second oldest known sailor in the country, not the first, by about 10 years. And it's something people are very proud of. And we've done really interesting things. It got 3D scanned. And put in someone's window in their house in Blackhall Colliery, which is one of the lowest economic areas of County Durham. And they did this street museum project with the Museum Association. And this was the objects they as a community chose to display in their windows. They basically created a gallery through the sit town. And the Lanchester diploma was one of their objects. We've done schools engagement. We teach Latin with this object. It's a really useful around our the national curriculum, the Romans, but it's really very personal as well. We then, in 2016, this is the next object we acquired. This is the Gilmany Hoard, part 2 and 3, found close to the Gilmany Hoard, part 1. It's kind of a more marshy, most likely the river has changed direction in that area. And this is father and son, David and Kevin, who we then got in contact with, we worked with. They also had to work with their students who created an exhibition. It's a fabulous, basically Bronze Age hoard made up of swords, spearheads, axe heads, and a hammer. Some of them are the furthest northern examples found. Most of them are deliberately broken. If you've been on a tour or go to Museum of Archaeology, you'll see them. And this is what we did. We just throw it out there. We work with our finders, we work with the community, and we interpret the objects. We've had a student exhibition, online exhibition, and now this, led by Beverly Still and the volunteer group Altogether Archaeology. With funding, they're now on the site themselves, excavating the site. And I think they've done 2 years of excavation and found fantastic with a Bronze Age site with all sorts of interesting features on the site. It all works collaboratively and quite creatively. Piercebridge, you've heard a lot about this, and I don't want to say too much about this, but Piercebridge, 4,500 finds, fabulous monograph by Philippa and Hella and all the experts there. And what we've done is we go, well, this is what you think the Romans are like. It's all about Roman occupation, the well-oiled military machine. But no, it's more about like this. which also includes illustrations, which obviously feed on from what Mark was talking yesterday. We've got a bridge that was donated by one of the finders. We include the picture done by Reading University. They were very kind. They've really supported us in checking our information, our fact. We got to use their pictures and their images, and they made sure that we got their monograph in the 300 words in the right way. Gary, you've heard about a lot, but the River Wear Assemblage, I still have this picture on the end. This is Gary, the students painted Gary. And this was an exhibition we co-curated with Gary, and I made my husband, who's also an illustrator, do the graphics, including a Lego map of Durham that breaks down the bridges and the finds into Lego visually. And we only had a short run. We only had a short run of time for this exhibition. So we had 2 months for this exhibition, quite a limited budget. Was it 9,000 visitors in 2 months? Thank you. BBC Breakfast News, local television, radio, and just kids coming in the hordes. They like it. We talk, we discuss things, we have activities. We are using our objects as creatively as we can, and all this is about river. It's all about something tangible and meaningful. Everyone can relate to throwing things in the river, whether it's children throwing marbles in. Everyone can relate. You throw your marbles in, the wedding rings. My mum threw her wedding ring in a canal. And I was like, why did you do this? You're going to be in my exhibition explaining your theory. She's like, it's for closure. But it's something that people can relate to. So what now? The last 10 years have seen us base ourselves on river archaeology across all the periods. We just applied for Arts Council England designation, which means the collection is of international and national significance. We have nearly 20,000 objects of just stunning river archaeology. I don't think we'll get it. That's just me being out there. I was writing this application with my line manager who was replying as well, and he was writing about beautiful Japanese ceramics owned by the imperial family. And I went, yeah, we've got a pair of dentures from 1880 found in the river. Probably someone sneezed. And it's which I just love the idea. It's ordinary objects that are the extraordinariness of this in a place completely dominated by a castle and cathedral and elite history. What is represented by the finds, and I would say it's across the entire conference, it's representing finds relating to everyone. It can be accidental, deliberate, or purpose, but there's a meaning there, and it's relatable. And I think in the current way where we're dealing with climate, which has been addressed, rivers are becoming increasingly significant. We've almost become, almost neglected our relationship with rivers, and more recently with flooding, climate change. I think generally society has become aware, and also we're going, it's nothing new. For the last 3,000 years, we have been throwing things in rivers. And really, what's next for us? We're going to keep building on that. We don't get designation, that's fine. But it's just raised how important this collection is. We're going to continue to work with students so they can explore the collections. We will collaborate with our finders. We'll do what we can. We'll work with our volunteers. We'll work with researchers, all just to give ideas about what these objects can be used for. There's no point in them sitting in the store. They should be used and accessible. I am trying to work out if I can get a new gallery. So I am currently applying for funding. And this would see a gallery that was funded on £20,000 redone to celebrate archaeology. And the theme of rivers will be fed through. We'll be talking about archaeological skills. Please ignore the Greek gallery at the end. I just have to have the Greeks in. But the focus will be this idea that archaeology isn't what you think. And it's not this distant past with people doing ritual acts. You're just as likely to throw coins in a wishing well as someone is 2,000 years ago. It's trying to make it relatable, enjoyable, and thematic, back to that interpretation theory. So I'm going to hand over to Anna, and she's going to take you through a bit of this is how we've done some of the things in practice.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, perfect. I will quickly run through this because we are running out of time. But the Piercebridge redisplay was one of 3 exhibitions that Gemma kindly gave me responsibility of when I started my internship back in October 2023. This was the first physical curatorial exhibition I had ever done. The brief was to redisplay the 5 cases which make up half of the current Roman gallery in the Temporary Museum of Archaeology. So, the Museum of Archaeology at Palace Green Library is a well-loved museum by tourist, students and the local community alike. This meant this project had an added layer of pressure to get it right. This gallery was created on a shoestring during the COVID-19 pandemic. With multiple issues due to isolation and restrictions, this gallery was never exhibited entirely to the desired vision set out by the team. As this was my first exhibition as an emerging museum professional in the world of curatorial, I had to remain mindful of what does still work in the gallery and what I could realistically, given budget and resource restraints, achieve in the time that I had. So what did I actually do? We therefore decided not to reinvent the wheel. We still wanted this gallery to be aimed at children and families, be about Piercebridge's amazingly varied finds, and show the everyday lives of people living at the fort. This then informed our approach, and we were able to come up with the goals we wanted to achieve this, which would make a noticeable difference to the gallery. So we had 4 key goals, including improved interpretation and new themes for all the cases, introducing replicas and constructions of objects in the bridge model, creating a more accessible and enjoyable audience experience, and rotating new objects and other objects out to keep our gallery new and updated. But my end goal was to basically show that Piercebridge is weird and wonderful. The collection is an amazing example of everyday lives, from household chores to daily worship to the gods, of people who lived in and around this fort at the edge of Rome's empire. My main mission was, from a curatorial perspective, was to enhance the interpretation that was already present, but make it slightly more obvious to the visitors. So firstly, improved interpretation was required for each case. This aligned with the adjusted themes for each case and shelf and new objects. Each theme was introduced with a title at the top of the interpretation panel and a short paragraph explaining what each section showed about Piercebridge. This made it easier for audiences to understand why we as curators group certain objects together. The illustrations which were included in the Bridge Over Troubled Water monograph, created by Sarah, Aaron and Mark, were included at the top of each new shelf section in the display. This added to the improved visual appeal in the gallery. The illustrations we used matched one of the objects that were in that case, encouraging visitors to look both at the text panel and to the objects itself. We decided to implement vinyl text panels, which are attached to the inside of the case. This came with the added necessity to improve the accessibility of reading the interpretation. As you can see, the previous text panels obstructed many visitors' views, especially children and people and wheelchair users, particularly of the top shelf. By implementing side text panels, it meant that no objects were blocked from any angle you viewed the case from. Using modern-day objects was a purposeful curatorial decision. The Museum of Archaeology's primary audience is families and school groups. A replica of a trebuchet, which was kindly built by my partner, was in the military case. This was placed next to the real ballista bolts. The sock was knitted by a member of the art team, the red colour inspired by the 3rd to 6th century Egyptian sock that was in the Legion exhibition at the British Museum. The foot was created by an upcoming SFX artist, Lauren, who wanted to get into exhibition design work, so this was her first paid commission by a museum. And of course, the bridge, which was created by diver Bob Middlemiss. He created this bridge after what he observed as he was diving. The success of these new additions was already fed back to us after day 1 of opening with this statement in our feedback book, which you can read on there, which is very nice to see. So, have I missed a section? The goal was to create a better audience experience. This involved 4 key challenges and changes to the gallery. One was enlarging coins onto frosted discs so people can see the details, and especially those that have been purposely manipulated. We use coloured discs and dots to attract attention to key artefacts, which is great for visitors who are coming into the display and they have limited amount of time. They can see the key object for that theme. We added more context about the site. As already mentioned, this was actually a point that was raised amongst our student placements who joined us in the summer. When thinking about another gallery space, they mentioned how maps can really be helpful in adding context to archaeological sites, particularly for people not local to that area. And as mentioned before, the changing of the text panels to the side also improved the gallery visually. As with every collection, it is always difficult to choose which objects go on display, as every single one has their own story to tell. With the 4,500 objects in this collection, some of the objects the team had never seen before, as cataloguing onto our CMS system is still an ongoing process. Therefore, during my research for the exhibition, I came across some hidden gems, which I knew I had to include. For example, my new favourite object, which is the little baby swan and goose head, which is just adorable. But we also included new pottery and glass, which had not been implemented into the display before. We also tried to include some diagrams, which helped visitors to visually see the types of objects in their original context, which is something very tricky to convey in the limited work capacity that we have. We created this diagram of a soldier's uniform, of especially the belt and shoulder strap, to help with the interpretation and the uses of these objects. Working with a riverine collection has its complexities from an interpretation perspective. The watery context always makes visitors ask the question, but why was it thrown in the river? Something we've talked about for the past 2 days. As archaeologists and curators, we can never fully know every motivation behind the depositions of every object. This would unfortunately require a time machine. What we do know is that rivers are living things, and they played an active role throughout human history, with the archaeology of waterways giving us glimpses to past interactions and relationships between humans and nature. However, our job is to lay out all the objects, facts and theories and let the visitors decide in their own minds what they believe happened. With Piercebridge, discrete collections such as the female coins, the military uniform and the keys lean towards purposeful deposition, not just those with direct gods or goddess reference. Therefore, we have tried to show the two sides of the coin, if you pardon the pun, but particularly these everyday objects through using the theory of life biographies. By sorting the objects into themes of the object's original use, this put the objects in the context of the first part of their life. Then, by using the interpretation throughout the gallery to see what kind of site Piercebridge is, we can show visitors the second part of the object's life, as an object may be used for religious belief, ritual purpose, or indeed whether it may have just been rubbish. So this process was a learning curve for me as a fresh museum professional. So I'll quickly summarise what I learned. Always know which bag corresponds to which object when removing and adding new objects. So installation management had an added layer of complexity due to the fact that I was taking out objects and putting new objects in, and there's 4,500 objects. It always takes longer than you think it will take. I had planned 2 days, it turned into 4, and there's still things I need to go back and change. And ensure that your vision is communicated to everyone on the team and is maintained throughout the process. By the time installation comes around, all of that planning and creating time beforehand seems not as important. However, I found it very useful to constantly keep in mind our main goals, as I mentioned earlier, throughout the installation period, as this can help to inform decision-making if and when things go wrong. If you are able to, do go and check out the new display if you haven't done so already.